here for this forum, the Black Leaders Forum, Cultivating Black Wellness. There's just something positive about that, isn't there? Cultivating Black Wellness. I'm loving it, I'm loving it. Thank you for being here this evening, and I want to first of all thank our panelists. I am Celeste Hodge Browden. I'm the president and CEO of the Alaska Black Caucus. We're a nonprofit organization that champions the lives of Black people and other marginalized groups in the areas of health, economics, education, and justice. And tonight you are here because of our health committee, and they are spearheading this effort through a grant that we received from the Municipality of Anchorage, Anchorage Health Department. And so Thea, I don't know if Dr. MBC is here, but if you are, I see you. Please stand so that they can recognize you. Those individuals are the co-chairs of our health committee. And I just want to invite everyone here, if you're interested in joining the Alaska Black Caucus, please visit our website or our Facebook page. The Facebook page is really current, it's active, as well as our website, but even more so. And so the AlaskaBlackCaucus.com is the website address. And so without further ado, I'm going to step out the way because I know we are here to hear the meat of tonight's forum. And Darla, I'm going to turn it over to you.
How's everybody doing tonight? Good. All right. You all are hearing me okay? Yes. Excellent. Well, it is a privilege to be here. My name is Darla Renee. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I am passionate about healing, about health, about wholeness. And I just want to have us acknowledge this lovely panel here. Would you all give them a hand? Thank you for being here tonight. It's so important what you all do, and I look forward to hearing what you all have to share tonight. But before I begin, I would just like to welcome everyone to take 3 deep breaths. How does that sound? Take a deep breath. Yes. Another? Last one. All right. I can't help but be who I am wherever I am. I just want to acknowledge all those who are here on this earth and who are not, who contributed to our wellness. We can think of people who held us and kept us safe, protected us and taught us, and allowed us to be who we are today. So I want to acknowledge them and to just set this off with an intention of wholeness and healing for everyone involved. So I expect for us to learn something, to leave this experience with more awareness and more tools to support our wellness and that of those we love. All right, so with that, I just want to, again, acknowledge the lovely panel here and to open this off by having you all share a little bit about your story. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and why this conversation is important to you. And of course, try to do that in as brief amount of time, hitting the points. That there's details and then there's the final point or the big picture. So let's go ahead and start with you closest to me, and we can just make our way around. I'll pass it to you.
I know Mary Andrews. There are probably 6 people that don't know me. Like a lot of Alaskans, when you've been here a long time, you get to be called sourdough. So I've been here over 62 years. Lived in Fairbanks, Anchorage, back in Anchorage. I was a counselor with McLaughlin. I was a union rep for 2 statewide unions. Got into human resources at the municipal and state level. And then for 20 years, I had my own contracting business. And now I'm just trying to mind my business.
My name is Monica Berg. I am a licensed professional counselor. I grew up here in Anchorage, and this is important to me because I work in the area of healthcare and mental health, and so I see things each and every day. I'm very interested in Black stress and vicarious trauma, and I think it's important that we talk about it as historical trauma as much in our community as it's talked about in other communities as a way to help us heal.
Good evening, I'm Pastor Leon D. May the First, Pastor Ribbon of Desert Community Church here in Anchorage. Been in Alaska, I guess it's about 27 years next month, and just love being kind of in Alaska. I'm excited about this because I'm Black. And I heard the young lady on the end talked about being here a while and being called a sourdough. Well, I inquired about that terminology upon getting here, and I was told it was somebody who soured on Alaska and didn't have any dough to get out.
Hello, I'm Simon Brown. I'm the manager for the Alaska State Defense Force. Been in Alaska since '74, and I'm here tonight because I wanted to hear and hopefully learn how minorities, especially older Black Alaskans, can advocate for themselves, and also how other people can advocate for older people to get the adequate medical services they need and deserve.
I'm Jewel Jones, and I'm often mistaken for, so I masquerade as Eleanor Andrews. It's been very useful, very useful. I was the health department director for way too long, and know many of you here in the room for 30 years, and survived 5 mayors, and that was quite a feat, I'm told. After I left the municipality, retired, and did work in Mountain View, I went for a temporary job and stayed 7 years. So there I go. So I am retired once again, and I need a job to rest up on this retirement. It's killing me.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Marcus Wilson, born and raised here in Anchorage all my life. The only time I left Anchorage is when I went away for college. Currently, I'm a principal for the Anchorage School District. Been over at Windler for the past 5 years as a principal. Just kind of growing up, never envisioned myself being a part of panels and doing things like this, but anytime that I'm asked, I have to step up and do this. And I do that in honor of my dad, the late Reverend Jesse Wilson, and I also do it in honor for the late Reverend Ted Moore. Just seeing those individuals be leaders in the community and always stepping up, that's something that I'm going to continue to do and teach and give back to the next generation. That's why I'm here tonight. Mental health is something that's near and dear to me. Just seeing kids, just my 26 years in education, just seeing the increase of kids dealing with mental health issues that are coming through our doors, and the lack of access that those children have. So that's why I'm here tonight, is to share some of that with you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Beverly Jones. Like Jewel, I was an employee of the Municipality of Anchorage, also surviving 45 mayors, and that all by itself is no easy task. Just imagine every 3 years knowing that you could potentially be completely out of job. But during that time, I served as a city planner. For 5 of those years, I was director of a portion of the planning department responsible for grants and aid that were provided by way of housing and urban development. My latter years with the municipality, I served as the customer service director for Municipal Light and Power, and then transitioned to Chugach Electric for 3 years as the member services manager. I'm here tonight, I think, mostly because one of my passions is doing what I can to serve. service is a strong part of my DNA chain, and serving the needy, serving the underserved, and making people as consistently aware of what is available in our community to serve whatever your needs might be. Mental health care is very important to me. Physical health care, my parents both passed away from diseases that are significantly high in the African American community, diabetes and heart disease. And so my passions lie in trying to do what I can to advocate for those kinds of services that can help to eliminate those diseases, and if nothing else, to give us access to care for those needs. So I'm really pleased to be a part of this illustrious panel this evening, and I hope that I can bring something of value to it this evening. And thank you for the invitation.
Good evening, everyone. I already can see we're going to need a couple of days. This is not going to be a one and done. I'm Eric Early. I believe I'm here today because of my history as a nonprofit career in supporting people who experience disabilities and seniors all throughout the state, from helping set up homes in Ukiahk all the way down to Ketchikan. And currently I oversee Access Alaska in terms of being a center for independent living. One thing in my career that I'm quite interested in is inclusivity, and that ultimately, even with the focus on persons experiencing disabilities, if we all live long enough, we will join that club. So how do we have an environment, a community, facilities that help those people be the best part of that community that they can in the way that they bring it to the table, meeting them where they're at. So I hope to share stories today that help bring that to the table and help build more inclusive communities from a servant leader's heart.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Kim Waller, and I have to thank the Alaska Black Caucus for having us here for this very important and timely conversation. Thank you so, so much. I look at this panel and many of these Alaskans who have helped to build this state and made contributions that have made this state a better place for myself and for my daughter, so I thank you for that. I am here because I care deeply about diversity. I care deeply about inclusion. I had the pleasure of starting my media career in this state. So I was born in Fairbanks, raised in Anchorage, part of the first Black radio station south here in the state of Alaska, and that career led me out of the state into a 20-year media career in New York, where I met my husband and did some work in this area. So I was doing some writing a lot about socioeconomics and race and identity and things like that. And so when it came time for me to step back from that media career and come back to Alaska so I could be in service to my aging parents and raise my daughter, when I was asked to do this work on behalf of the 4-acre group, I jumped at the opportunity because it is about, and by that I mean diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so in my role, I am the Senior Director of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion with the 4-acre group. And we're the nonprofit association for the state of Alaska. So when I was asked to do this work, it dovetailed nicely with the work that I had done in media for nearly 2 decades and the writings I had done for the Huffington Post and in other venues. And I care deeply about our children, about the next generation of Alaskans. I have benefited from diverse spaces, from diverse personal relationships, diverse working relationships, diverse teams. And so I welcome this conversation today. And again, thank you so much for hosting.
Absolutely. Thank you all for sharing. Absolutely. Again. So it's incredibly important, self-advocacy. So I want to start these questions out with this topic of self-advocacy. What are some key ways in which Black folk, BIPOC folk can advocate for themselves in your field?
I think you have to show up and identify yourself. And I always feel, oh, I'm excluded, they don't want anyone like me. You don't know till you go. And if you go with a sense of self-respect and pride, I think you can make yourself welcome, at least open doors wherever you go.
from my point of view, especially teaching folks who experience disabilities how to self-advocate, is being educated, representing yourself, taking all of yourself to the moment and being able to help share and learn, be open but direct. You do have to use your voice. One thing that I understand is not a lot of people understand the power of their voice. Voice can be on paper, voice can be on social media. Now, I don't understand social media, but voice can be on social media. But if you're to be a self-advocate, you're always representing yourself and others. Today, this is self-advocacy. This is the whole point of how do we bring forward an understanding of the health needs and moving that forward for people of color, especially our Black Alaskans.
To add to that, education is groups like this where we teach each other how to advocate for ourselves, learning what questions to ask, learning more in-depth information about yourself, your community, and understanding that sometimes the medical service person you're seeing may not have your interest at heart. It's not intentionally, they're busy, so we can educate each other on what kind of information to seek out, to understand, and then, as he said, using that active voice to advocate and demand questions, answers to your questions, and don't just walk away until you get those answers.
I would add to that. Okay, the only thing that I would add to that at this point would be to say to show up. Self-advocacy is about being in the place where it happens. And I think oftentimes we think when you see things being advertised like this, or anything related to what's going on in the municipality, oh, they're talking about creating a new planning and development handbook. Oh, that has nothing to do with me, when in fact it does, because that's about your community. That's about how your community is being constructed. And you want to be a part of that. You don't want to be that person that says, oh, I didn't know they were doing that. Oh, and the next thing you know, your neighborhood is the one where the new highway is going through because you chose not to show up. So self-advocacy is about health. It's not just about your physical health, it's about the health of your community. And we all have a place in that conversation, and we can actually make a difference. And I found that in city planning, one of the most distressing parts was any meeting that I ever had to attend, community meeting, there weren't enough of us there to speak for us. And so we have a very powerful opportunity every time a door swings open that says, come, let us tell you, we should show up so they can tell us and then we can tell them.
I'd like to add one more thing to that. Besides Jewel, I think that we go to every meeting there is. When we started the Urban League here in 2007, we made it for African Americans and other people in like circumstances because there's only 6 to 7% of Alaska that's Black. And I can talk louder too. And so every time I go to something and I don't see any of us, I'm thinking, what do you think? Do you need a personal invitation? And I'm here to say that if you need a personal invitation, I will take you. You know, sometimes you don't know the subject matter or you think you won't be an expert at something, have someone take you. And then you become indoctrinated and you feel more comfortable. But I just think that we have a responsibility that we may be shirking.
And maybe just to add on one thing to that is we really try to shelter and protect our kids. And those are things that we need to mentor and bring them to so they can be the next generation, because if not, we just get further and further disconnected from things like that or opportunities like that. So it's really important not only for us to self-advocate, but to teach our kids and bring them to those events as much as they may kick and scream. And I remember kicking and screaming as a kid, but showing up to those events, and then as you get older, you start truly seeing how important it was for me to be at those events, and it just becomes part of what I need to do and what I need to show my kids.
One of the things that we talked about was, lived experiences to, share a little bit. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. when I started working for the municipality many years ago, then Mayor George Sullivan invited me to come to his staff meeting. And my office was right across the hall from his. And I said, okay, well, I'll sit in the back on the side, because I thought, you know, you had to be really brilliant to run a city. You had to be really brilliant to run a city. So I'm sitting on the sideline, and in that room were 10 white guys, 10 older white guys. And they would jabber here and jabber there and go, and I thought, is that what it takes to really run a city? And then the mayor said, well, Jewel, what do you think? And I said, you said what? What do I think? Well, let me tell you, here's an idea. And he liked the idea. And he said, guys, I want you to work with Jewel on that idea. What I learned was I could speak a voice if I had an idea. I understood I could be right, wrong, or indifferent. They had to listen because the mayor told them to. But it wasn't brilliance. It was just common sense. So from that point, you know, you learn to have confidence in your ability. If you're wrong, stop. If you're right, go forward. But, you know, have confidence in your ability, because you never know.
Well, now I get in where I fit in. And thank God for my esteemed panelists, and each one of them interface with this youth, the audience, initially by sharing what was passionate to them and relating that to their presence here on tonight. Well, I'm passionate about people's relationship to our God, our Creator, and I believe that's one of the reasons that I am here. As it relates to self-advocacy and how we can encourage Black folk to do that relative to my field and our field, is that it was mentioned a minute ago, showing up is important. But I think next to showing up, speaking up is very important. If you're going to self-advocate, and there are things that you need to get out there, nobody can do it better than you can. You have to learn how to speak up for yourself and be persistent and loud in your speaking, sometimes making sure that you are being heard. And relative to my field, you know, encourage folk to speak about what needs they may have, and also about desired trainings and those things that are needed, recommending the trainings that they desire and need, and so you can work to develop and provide what is needed. But it happens when you speak up.
Yeah, thank you all. Were you going to say something? Sorry to be late to the party, but just kind of dovetailing on that, showing up. And when I think of self-advocacy in mental health and holistic wellness, I think of showing up. We need to learn how to show up for ourselves. And that comes first by learning how to acknowledge what it is that we're feeling, what it is that we're seeing, and how it is that it is affecting us. To go and seek the help that we need. And then being willing to provide education. Just a small personal story. I went to my healthcare provider for years talking about how tired I was and my memory and all of these different things that were going on. And I just kept getting, well, you're just too busy, you just need to slow down. You have 3 kids, it's normal for you to be tired, you know, all of these different things. And it wasn't until I went back to school to become a mental health counselor did the bell ring that, man, maybe I had been depressed that whole time. So I went online and I took the screener and I realized that I was depressed, and I went back to my doctor, and it would have been easy for me to show up in the way that she would think that a Black woman would typically show up. But what I did is I said, you know, I think this is what I have. I did this screener and this is what I have. And I encouraged her to make that a part of her practice, that every customer, every person that comes into her care should be screened for depression. And as we continued to talk over time, she started to tell me stories about other patients that she had had who, now I'm thinking and wondering, maybe this was that too. And so being willing to educate people and encourage them to do those things. But it starts with us first acknowledging, like, wait a minute, something about the way that I'm feeling is, I know when I'm a little off, and I need to, and continuing to ask questions and to wonder about those things, because we look for other people to validate us, but the truth is the validation starts with us. If we won't say that we're sad, if we won't say that we're hurting, who will speak that for us?
Thank you so much. That's such an empowering word. So I hope you all heard that, about using your voice, showing up, that your words can be audible and they can also be on paper, all right? Be willing to listen to how you feel, because that gives you information. Thank you all so much for that. Going along that same vein, I want to speak to the idea of vetting, because my first thought was about worthiness. And when you're a privileged person, you expect to be treated well. As our history is in oppression, sometimes we X ourselves out of the conversation before we get a chance, right? So we have to know that we're worthy and listen, but we also have to know that these people are here to serve us. So how can we vet professionals to know whether or not they're a good fit for us? And this includes every field.
Well, I'll be brief on that as it relates to vetting professionals and that kind of thing, a couple of ways, by types of training that they may have, and looking into how well qualified they are, and looking at their practice and what have you, and what have they accomplished in their time in that specific profession, and what have you. And when you think about warning flags to look out for, basically I would say unprofessionalism would be one right off the top. And I know it's part of another discussion, but people have a way of kind of putting you off, and you can sense and know when you've been put off in whatever setting that you're in. And that's a red flag for me. And but when you speak specifically about vetting, you're talking about how qualified you are to be doing what you are doing.
Okay. I was going to second what you said about the conversation, right? And seeing, in terms of vetting, I think that starts very early, or it has in our household anyway. My daughter is 8 years old, right? And so she comes with me to my doctor's appointment. She was at a doctor's appointment with me today, actually. And when she has conversations, even with her little 8-year-old language, every time we go to either a family physician or a dentist, I look at her and I say, Winter, my daughter's name is Winter, I said, Winter, do you have your 2 questions ready for what we're gonna talk about with your doctor today? And she says, yep, I got them ready, right? And so getting her in the space to where, again, as a little Black girl, she understands that it is important for her to have conversations with her provider, and that they should listen to her, and that she should listen to them. And so it's cute, because now we've been doing this so long, sometimes she goes up in providers with her little follow-up conversations from last time they talked. But really, again, when you sit in the space with someone, especially a healthcare provider, and we have many, many talented Black and brown healthcare providers, by the way, in the city of Anchorage. I've been so pleasantly surprised in that area, because I seek them out. I have a list. But when you have these conversations, right, you know who is for you, right? I think it's called bedside rapport or bedside manner, right? Pay real attention to that. Pay real attention to that. And of course, vetting them online and word of mouth is always good as well.
And I would add to that, if you sense to get a feeling that you gotta get put off or what have you, then what you need to do is press your claim until you're satisfied with the response that you need to have.
It's also important to understand that who you're talking to is not infallible, right? They're not always going to be the one and done answer, the correct answer always, and you as an individual is going to come in with your individual need in that moment. I've had an example in a personal story of I kept getting gout. I don't know if you've had gout, but don't. I was trying to figure out what all of a sudden I was doing in my life to change to where I was getting the gout. And in my own research, found out the blood pressure medicine I was on was what was creating the gout. It was all about the type of your diuretic attached to the blood pressure medicine. It was Diavan HCT. Hopefully that doesn't, just so everybody knows, don't mess with that. But when you research it, it literally says does not work well for African Americans. It literally says that online, right? So I go and I share it with the doctor, and they're like, oh, well, what do I do next? You're the doctor. So let's figure this out. But he was like, oh no, I thought you had a plan. You're the doctor, right? So we had to have that discussion. So don't go in thinking that they're always going to be there and they can fix it. You're going to have to partner in that fix.
And I would add to that, part of human nature for us is to be fearful. And I think, recognizing that fearful, we're going in to see this expert. We don't know what the problem is. We know what the symptoms are because they're happening to us. But challenging that bedside manner, it's your body. It's the only one you've got. So you have to overcome that. Not being overly aggressive, not being nasty, but just saying, this is who I am. This is what I think. This is the research I've done. Or can you point me to some additional research? I was talking to my doctor there, and we were just chatting, and he happened to mention to me that he had a Black woman who has sickle cell anemia. There is one blood transfusion that will be helpful, but we don't do it here with the blood bank of Alaska. He told me, now I haven't researched it yet, so I'm going to find out for sure. But he said that we don't have a large enough Black population. Therefore, we are not being given the value of this shot. I said, well, one, that lady, what do you need? So I'm going to the blood bank, and I'm going to go and ask, is that true? And if not, I'm going to come back to the Health Committee and the Black Caucus and everybody in this room, and I'm going to tell you, we can change that. We can change it, but we have to pursue it because it's the only body we have.
And I would piggyback relative to Black wellness. The gentleman was stating a minute ago about researching medications and what have you. I would encourage all of us to research medications for yourself. I researched one of my meds, and there were some side effects, and I went and talked to my doctor about that. He says, well, I have never heard that with anybody, none of my patients or anything, and he pulled up his side effects of the medication that he had prescribed, and what I had found was nowhere in there. And so what I did was I took out the old reliable iPhone and pulled up the medication. I said, what's that? Right there. So why doesn't your high-tech involvement with these medications not list what you can simply pull up on an iPhone?
I was thinking about this question of Betty. For me, had an accident, got hit from behind. Who do I know in the legal community, or who do I know that may know someone in the legal community? And I think one of the things that I've had to do and have advocated for is for us to talk to one another, because oftentimes fear and embarrassment about what the thing, whatever the thing is, it may keep you from sharing, especially around matters of mental health. We don't want to continue to stay in that vacuum. We are afraid to talk about the fact that, I think I might be depressed. I'm thinking about how great it would be not to be in this world anymore. Those are signs. I'm exhausted every day. I don't want to get up. I don't want to. The sun is shining for the first time in however many months, and I don't want to be outside. So I think it's important for us to talk to each other, talk to your friends, people who you think may not want to hear what you have to say. They're there for you. Talk to them. They may know someone. That's how the vetting starts. Oh, I have a friend who had that same situation. Or I know somebody else that, I know someone who knows an attorney who can advocate for you on the job. Here we have a couple of people who've already talked today about having worked with unions on the job. Just talking to one another and allowing ourselves to relieve ourselves of the shame or any of embarrassment that may be historically associated with whatever that thing is, to start the conversation so that we can get help.
We'll let this be our last comment.
Just really practically what I tell customers that I work with about finding a mental health counselor is I say, finding a mental health counselor is like finding a good pair of shoes. You've gotta go, you gotta try it on, or try and find the perfect outfit for an occasion. You've gotta go and you've gotta try some things on. A good mental health counselor, especially one in private practice, is going to be willing to do a consultation with you. And so contact, go on Psychology Today and look at the pictures and read whatever, but call and ask for a consultation. And when you're having that conversation, as Minnie said, it all starts with a conversation. If it feels like a good fit, then you try it out. And there's nothing wrong with if at some point it doesn't feel like a right fit, to try someone else. A counselor is just as interested in having a good therapeutic relationship with you, a relationship where you can heal, as you are. And so there's not an offense if you're not the right person. And most of the time, they will be willing to help you find someone who will be a right fit.
Absolutely, thank you. I hope you all took notes of those responses. We're vetting for training, experience, qualifications. We're paying attention to unprofessionalism. We're conversing with our peers about great professionals in the community. Who's good? We're also talking about, we're assessing their listening skills. Do they dismiss us? Do they listen to us, right? So thank you for that. Those were amazing tips. We're going to shift gears a little bit. I want to kind of talk about education. What are important ways that we can advocate for the wellness of our students in the school atmosphere? We have a principal here, so I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I'd love to speak to that. And I'll speak on it on two ways. One, just kind of coming into the school scene and in education. I remember when I first started out, it was a really taboo subject, talking about mental health, talking about a clinician coming into school to access a child. And I was right there. It's like, nope, I don't want this to happen here in this setting. For whatever reason, for whatever block that I had, and I can admit that. Because you probably start thinking of liability and things like that, and just, kind of going down that path. But just the more experience that I gained in seeing the issue, and I would say that first issue, that's a huge barrier in our community, is access. I'm sitting here trying to stop clinicians, and when I say this was a district-wide issue that we had going on, sitting, blocking resources from coming in to our schools and accessing and trying to help our kids and meet our kids where they could access, because it's really hard, especially in our community when you have parents that's working 1 and 2 jobs. You have both parents that are working and having to take off of work, you know. Those are all things that are very difficult and that are barriers for our parents. So access is definitely one that I saw as a huge issue. And then that taboo thing goes both ways, is in our community. I saw a lot of people in our community who don't even think mental health is an issue for themselves, much less their kids. And I can see it. I mean, year after year, I can see it growing. So something that we focused in our school, especially the past, I would say 4 or 5 years, even before COVID hit, is teaching our kids. You have physical health and you have mental health. And you have to be proactive in taking care of the needs of your mental health just as much as your physical health. So really normalizing mental health as a normal thing to our kids and teaching them about that, teaching them about the brain science, teaching them about some of those things that we're just talking about right now, speaking up for yourself, recognizing that there is something wrong and that there is resources out here that you can access that's going to help you with your mental health, and not make it something to be ashamed of.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Can you hear me? My daughter's job at the school district is a family resources coordinator. She's kind of like the social worker at school on steroids. There used to be one for every school in the district. I think there are 4 now. And what happens at school is that all the ills at home show up with the child at school. Twice a week, the police will be there because of a custody dispute and the parents are pulling the kid's arms outside the front door. Or a kid says, I'm not gonna go home today because they're gonna beat me. Or a kid says, like that TV commercial, if I didn't have lunch here, I wouldn't eat. And so her job, and I wish there was one at every school, is to work with the nurse, the part-time counselor, the part-time assistant principal. Marcus knows all these jobs now are not fully funded. To have someone that comes to school 2 times a week. But the job is to identify those ills and work as a community with the school to work with the parents. And if you find that someone is dismissive at the school level and doesn't want to talk about it, then go above their head and go above their head until you find helping individuals, because that's their job.
I just wanted to jump in and quickly say, I love that we are destigmatizing mental health by having these conversations, right? Not only in our schools, right, in academia, but also in our places of business. I mean, it is to the state to where, you know, right now, if I were to leave my job at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and say, I'm taking a mental health day, bye y'all, everybody would know what I was doing. And everybody would be like, oh, right, go ahead, girl, enjoy your mental health day, right? We know what that is because we have destigmatized it, and now we are talking about that. Whereas, I mean, I think a lot of these conversations too it differs depending on your culture. So my father's French West Indian and came to this country in his early teens, right? And learned the language and had to get the job and 5 younger siblings and all the things and, learn English from French and all of these obstacles that I know nothing about. I know nothing about that. Do you know what I'm saying? And like, I can't even imagine trying to have a conversation with Daniel Victor Rufin Blanchett, my West Indian father, about mental health. Right? It's a completely different mentality. Yeah. You know, he has an immigrant's mentality. We don't talk, what do you mean you're not going to work today? Like, what's this about? You sad? Right? So I just wanted to say that, you know, I really appreciate that, you know, even having these conversations helps to move us along, because it helps to remove so much of the stigma that, you know, that we know exists in our communities, specifically around mental health and wellness.
Absolutely. Do we have another comment on this question about advocating for our students in the school space?
I just wanted to quickly just ask, and just something to think about and maybe not respond to now, but I think we have begun to trivialize the word mental health. We use it for everything. They have a mental health issue. They got a mental health problem. All the people that you see that are unhoused and homeless, well, they all have a mental health. You know, mental health considerations are serious. And we need trained people. We don't need just big people running around hugging them and saying, calm down, calm down. Right. So we need to not only understand, recognize, and appreciate the problem, but we need to advocate for having trained Black professionals who understand the issue and can really deal with it, because everything now is trivialized in terms of mental health, I think.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that as it relates to that idea, but relative to advocating for your kids at school and all of that, I would say this: be present at home and at school. Every now and then you need to check in on and see what's going on. You need to ask questions of your children. You need to ask questions of their teachers as well, and relative to their classroom experience. And but to get to the mental health aspect of it, mental illness is just as prevalent as physical illness. And there are things prescribed for physical illness. There are things that are prescribed for mental illness. You say mental illness, boy, you can think about somebody going off a deep end, but guess what? Anxiety, depression, those things are mental issues that can be treated. And but I would say this, and this is really where I want to jump off as it relates to Black wellness and kids in school and all of that. Early on, I don't get it as much as I used to, but there was a period in the Anchorage School District where teachers and the medical person authorized at the school and all of that were always so quick, specifically for Black kids, to want to medicate them when they didn't necessarily need that kind of medication. Oh, it's ADHD, it's this, it's that, and you need to be on meds, and quick to do that. But I would say this: you talk about, you mentioned a minute ago about an evaluation and all of that. I do think that kids need to be appropriately evaluated, and I think parents ought to be allowed to be at that evaluation as well, and if they so desire, get other opinions outside of the school district, because I don't think kids need to be labeled as such without a definitive measure having been taken to ascertain what really is going on. And now I'm going to say this because of the profession that I'm in and who I am. Not everything that looks like mental illness is medical mental illness. And I'm going to say that. Sometimes there is demonic intervention. Hello, yes. Lights and walls. Amen. And you need a qualified perspective and enlightenment to be able to look and ascertain and sense and feel what's really going on here, and know how to advocate and deal with that aspect of it as well.
Thank you all so much for that. I think going back to what was said about qualification, educators diagnosing your children is not their qualification in mental health. So you want to be mindful about that. We heard about access to resources, speaking up, being present for your kids, having eyes on them, and developing relationships with other staff and people in the school space. Thank you so much for those words and that information. I want to shift gears and talk about some social issues. When it comes to, I'm going to give you a statistic, 45.1% of Black women have experienced intimate partner violence, sexual, physical violence, and or stalking in their lifetime, 45.1%. How can we support the safety and empowerment of Black women and femmes?
I was Commissioner of Administration. This is for all state employees. Sometimes local subdivisions, they say, oh, that guy's always a grab asser. There was a guy in the ferry system who had put holes in the wall of the women's restroom and been watching women for years. And nobody did anything about it. I said, why not? Well, you know, if you fire him, he'll get the union. I said, it'll take the union 3 years to do the case. You'll be free of him for 3 years if he wins. And then I became a federal contractor. Basically, I was the only one woman in the state that did things that usually retired military guys did, running the mess halls, a dry cleaner, a hospital housekeeping, public works. And the majority of the women that worked for me in the service sector talked about, oh, you know, if I want to keep my job, I've got to go in there and sit on the chair with him. Or there's one guy that kept pictures in his desk. He wanted women to come and sit at the desk and look at the pictures with him. I think he lasted 48 hours because I had to find out what his name was, where it came from, to get rid of it. And so what it takes is recognizing what the rights of women are. They stand up for themselves, and the men stand up with them. And there are a fair amount of Black men that do the same thing. I don't know if it's something they learned or feel like, well, if he did it, I can do it too. But women have to demand the respect that never happens. You don't allow it once because it will continue. So, yeah, I was an employer for 20 years with my own people, and like I said, I greatly enjoyed firemen that did those kinds of things.
Can you repeat the last part of that question?
How can we support and advocate the safety of Black women?
My response to that would be to provide education. Education, and give them a safe place to come to discuss. Like Eleanor was saying, if no one had ever told her in confidence what they knew was happening, maybe they don't want to give you their name, they don't want to tell you who they knew or they heard was violating women in this way, you would never know. So we have to, once again, have the conversation and then educate yourself on what's available to you in your community, on your job, in your church. Whatever services are available to fill that need that you have, avail yourself of that. Don't be afraid, because fear is just a great debilitator. It's not. I mean, it will keep you from doing something that if you only opened that door and allowed that information to come in, it wouldn't have taken 3 years. It wouldn't take 20 years to then get rid of that person or those people or those circumstances that were causing the abuse to continue. I attended a function that was held by the Awake Shelter one year, and I remember one of the lady's stories was that she was being consistently abused by her husband. She had 3 boys, and the fear of not being able to leave with her children is what kept her there for like 20 years. And then one day, after a severe beating by her husband and a threat to if she ever tried to leave, that he would murder her and her children, she finally decided, you know what? I've got to take that chance. So she left her home. She literally ran away, ran to her next door neighbor to say, I need your help. This man that you think is this, he's really he's killing me and he's killing my children. And she was told by this family, the male in the house, and his wife stood there and was told, oh, that can't be true. You just need to go home. So to me, the big part of that story was, we have to be willing to hear it. If I come to you and tell you, just because of what you think the facade is, you've got to believe that if I had the nerve to run to your home barefooted and without my children, this is serious and that I need your help. And I think that when I think about abuse like that, one of the first questions we ask about the woman, well, why did she stay? Why did she just leave? It's not that simple. Because if you don't own anything, nothing in that house, not a credit card, none of the cash, it's not in your name, you don't know where the cash is being held, you think that you are indoctrinated to believe that you can't. Okay. So she left that night, went from house to house to house, and finally found someone who opened the door, listened to what she had to say, called the police, got her into a shelter, and then was eventually, she couldn't even bring her children with her. So imagine as a mother, I have thought about this many times, thinking that I'm not there to protect my children. He can't beat me anymore, so what must he be doing to my child? The agony of something like that is enough of a fear to keep you from doing it, but I would say educate yourself on what it would take to run barefooted, to get to where you have to get. If you've got to crawl over bloody stumps to get there, get your children, educate yourself on what it's going to take to then keep your children. Because that's the other part. Even going through the court system, it's not always favorable to us because of assumptions that people make about our culture. Well, she's just a loud black woman. You don't want to allow those kinds of presumptions and fears to keep you from seeking the help that you need, because there will be a door that's going to open. As the pastor said, that's your next advocacy, right? Go to your church. If you've got a church, lean hard into the resources that are available to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll dovetail off of that because the big issue is resource, that there are not a lot of resources available, and when a woman is deciding that she needs to leave her home, we have a housing shortage in Anchorage. Where is she gonna go? How is she gonna pay for that? How is she gonna transport her kids to and from school? I mean, it's a big undertaking in order to do that, and so for us as a community to be thinking of ways of how we can help. Go bags are essential for safety for women who are being abused, to be able to have a go bag stashed somewhere safe. So would you be willing to stash a go bag for your friends? And do they know that if they ever needed to stash money or clothing or things, if they were unsafe, do they know that they could store that at your house? And then what are the other resources as a community that we could gather up so that when she leaves, if she has to leave with nothing, that her kids would still be able to have clothing and all of those things. But even further than that, we have to be looking to the next generation of little girls who are coming up. And it's a slow fade into being abused. You're slowly being beat down. But it's a little bit harder to be beat down when you know exactly who you are when you show up at the door, right? And so, do our little girls know? Are they being validated by us? Do they know how important they are because we stop and we listen to them and we pay attention to them and we treat them well? We hear their voice. And so how do we raise up this next generation of little girls to be confident enough? How do we get them around men, and how do fathers become men who are opening doors for them and treating their daughters well and taking them out on dates and showing them how it is that a man should treat them, so that the moment that somebody shows up and does not, they're like, that ain't how my daddy did it. Or if a father is not in the home, who is a mentor that you know who might be able to do that for your little girl. Because some things we have to change the next generation. And so I think those are things for us to be thinking about, is how do we empower them.
Did you have something to share?
I kind of did.
I'm glad. I was waiting for a man to say something about this issue.
Yeah, well, let this man say this. I've known black women who beat up on their husbands too, but let me, let me say this, but as it relates to black women, we have to give them avenues of redress and sometimes even training and a whole lot of encouragement. One of the things that professionals in our experience really have issues with, and this is my personal conviction. Other pastors, preachers, ministers may not have the same, but I do not personally believe that God wants a woman to be abused and to remain in an abusive relationship. I don't counsel initially divorce, but sometimes separation and intervention may be needed in that circumstance and situation. But even if it comes to divorce, divorce is not the unpardonable sin, even though God hates divorce. But women need to be protected and cared for. And as I heard a minute ago, daddies and fathers ought to be an example to their daughters of what it's like to have a man in a marital relationship the way you treat their mother. One thing in my own personal experience, my wife and I will have been married 39 years in August. And one of the things we did, we covenanted from day one. And my thing was, I'm not going to lay my hands on you outside of prayer. And you're not going to lay your hands on me outside of prayer. And that's how we're going to live. And for 39 years, that's how it has been.
We have one more comment on this subject.
I want to speak to things that used to be provided in the workplace. About 30, 40 years ago, we went through a period of enlightenment in human resources, and almost every health insurance plan had an employee assistance program. And you could go and have a confidential meeting about anything: family violence, health issues, things that your kids may be doing to abuse drugs or substances. And everyone was invited to do it, and it was part of your health plan. There was no pejorative involved. It was confidential. It was paid for by the employer. Also, as an employer, I had an opportunity to have people from Awake and Star come and talk to the women who work for me. And I'd say 90% of the people who work for me were women. And so those are things that you can ask for in the workplace. You can have a little meeting at lunchtime and have them come over and talk to people who are interested in the conference room. And those are things that employers, I think, are happy to provide. They can't help a person individually, but if you consider that an individual spends more time at work, those 8 to 9 hours, than they spend with their children or their husband when they're awake. Okay, you know, may sleep together, but there's not a lot of talking going on. So I'm just saying that those are opportunities that we can use resources that exist, and we're not just sharing anecdotes with each other, because I don't have your faith tradition, but I saw somebody get married at her father's house, and this preacher told her to submit. She submitted to everything. He nearly beat her to death, stole all her money, and she wouldn't speak up because of her faith tradition. So that's just not where I'm centered.
I really appreciate you all sharing this, and I just want to leave you with this. This is a community issue. It's not a woman's issue. And I want to leave you with just a rhetorical question. This is a social issue. What social deterrents exist for abusive men? Because we talk about women. Educate yourselves, be available to support, be a person that she can come to, create safe spaces. But what can we do as a society to make this behavior unacceptable, right? So I just want to leave you all with this, because you can get to use your thinking caps, because we all have a responsibility in this subject. I want to shift gears really quickly. I want to talk about COVID. We're continuing to have mutations of this disease. What are some key elements? I want to make these last few questions as brief as possible. Let's get to the tools and the keys that we can use to leverage our physical well-being in the face of COVID mutations. And put your hands up so we can pass this mic around. Anyone?
Kind of look like folk are pretty much over. The COVID aspect of it, but I would say this, there are strains and remnants, and my only thing on that would be vigilant, vigilant, I should say. Keep your eyes and ears open and pay close attention to your surroundings. So be diligent of your surroundings, notice your surroundings, and if you're in a situation, an area where you think that even though we're not wanting to do that anymore, if you think you need to mask up, then be free enough to do that, because after all, you only have one life to live and or to give.
And we have an opportunity every day not to make somebody sick if we're sick. So accept community health standards. So many hundreds of thousands of people died in America because of not believing in health and science and restrictions. So I just think it's a matter of community and self-respect. If you think you're ill, go see about it. The test packets are still free, and protect yourself and your community.
This issue, along with all the issues that have been discussed tonight, I say tie back in a lot of ways to how we vote or the lack of voting. Because all these things, policies, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's education, whether it's having sufficient resources in school to take care of our kids, whether it's having sufficient health care in our communities, or whether it's addressing the COVID issue. If you don't get involved in all aspects of life and vote people in the office who is going to provide these resources, who's going to be concerned about these resources, and who's going to bring them to you. And you have the right to demand this from the people who represent you, whether it's at the city level, the school board, the state level, or the federal level. All these things are interconnected, and sometimes we try to put these in separate silos and address them in separate silos, and we never bring them together. And so you got one small group working on domestic violence, and another group working on COVID. Let's tie it together and bring these resources and demand the people who took on the mantle of being our representatives and being out there saying they're protecting us, make them do it. And you have the power to say, Mr. Brown, you said this, you didn't do it, guess what? You're not going back to Washington. You're not going back to Juneau. Yes. But so many times we ignore that, or we get our own little private things. Don't get sidetracked. You see some representative supporting your Juneteenth initiative, and you forget about these big issues, health and survival. Let's time together and demand from all our leaders, and whether it's the leaders of legislation, or whether it's your community leaders, or whether it's your church and everything else, demand leaders do what they are prescribed to do, and don't accept we'll work at it later, or that's too big. Nothing's too big if we attack it together.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Continuing on, I want to address the issue of suicidality amongst our young men. You know, we're looking at a rate of 4 times higher. There's a rate of suicidality at a level of 4 times higher Black men than Black women. And the key ages are around 15 to 24. And I also want to interject that in our queer community, there are high rates of suicidality as a result of social expulsion and shame that increases the risk of suicidality. So I want to hear a few pointed words about how we can deter those rates.
I think we need to really look at trying to find ways to recreate safe spaces, particularly for Black men. You know, it used to be the barbershop. For those of you who have been around for a while, you know, the Mr. Dells, the hair doctors, the ebony and ivories, those, in a sense, really were safe spaces, particularly for Black men. At the Betty Davis Summit, we tried to have a start of a conversation, and I think it's going to continue to grow. Just Black barbers together to talk about that space and how it's changed. Celeste laughed when I said, I think we've become an international barbershop community now. But we don't have the Black-owned barbershops as we had before. But they're still dominated by men, and those conversations still need to be developed in a safe space, in a place where they don't have prying eyes. Because when men can talk to men and really get good counsel, good discussion, to be able to say, man, I'm experiencing that too. It's not something I want to talk about with my wife or my mother. I need this counsel. There are communities, many of the fraternities, as I understand, are doing some things, meeting at, I think, at Baggage, the Catholics perhaps, meeting at Baggage, trying to get young men, but the guys are there, but the kids don't get that connection yet. So whatever we can do as a community to help bring that space together, whether it's in the basement, whether it's in the park, whether it's in the barbershop, to allow that conversation to take place is, I think, very important for our survival.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Safe spaces.
Probably just something to share with that is just kind of going back to my childhood, and just thinking of the adults in this community that helped raise me. Something I think is a little more difficult now is we're a lot more segregated, even within our own community, than we used to be, which is a barrier. So I agree, creating more circles where we can have honest conversations, safe places, something that, you know, my fraternity brothers with Omega Psi Phi, checking on each other. Yeah, checking on each other, just picking up the phone, seeing how you doing. Just simple things like that. And just normalizing that kind of behavior with no agenda behind it, but just checking to truly see how you were doing and what can I do. But just sometimes being an ear. Because just like I said, some things I don't feel comfortable having a conversation maybe with my wife or somebody, and I can have it with this brother. And I see a brother back there who often comes and sits on my couch, lets it out. And I just sit and listen. And that's what we're there for, just being there for each other. But normalizing that and growing up, we were taught to keep a lot of that in. We were taught to be strong. What does it look like to be a strong Black male? Growing up, who could you talk to? Who could you express some of these feelings and things like that you were going through? We weren't taught that. Suck it up. Push through. So normalizing that behavior and kind of unlearning some things that have been taught to us is the key pushing forward. Showing emotion. Showing that that's okay. That's not a sign of weakness. You know, teaching our kids that.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. I think that everyone should have a feelings wheel in their home. If you don't have one, you can get one online to start talking to your kids about feelings and the ability to be able to name them and making it acceptable to feel sad or scared or to be compassionate, to show empathy, to cry at a commercial because it hits you just right in the right space at the right time. I also think just talking, figuring out how to have a safe way to talk about vicarious trauma. You know, when we think about all the things that have gone on over the past, 5 years or more with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and all of those things that, we were watching and marching and doing all of these things. But what were our kids feeling, and how were they experiencing that? And what did it feel like to them when their parents went to go to a march, when all that they see that happens on TV at marches, right? And how do they even know how to express that? And so how do we give them the space to talk about what they're feeling in light of all of these things that they hear us talking about, or that they're seeing on the news, and just providing those spaces, but let that first safe space be at home. There used to be a commercial a long time ago that said, "Stop, count to 10, take hold of yourself before you take hold of your children." I don't know if some of you, maybe that ages me, but the reality of it is we as parents have to get our mental health in check so that we can be emotionally available to be able to hold space for the emotions of our children. And so I think that's something that we need to start with as well.
I'd like to talk about the word interdependence. Everything we've talked about, we've used the word community. We've talked about several topics. In my world, as you heard me say, Center for Independent Living earlier, for that to be successful calls on so many other variables for it to work. Part of it would be, we use what's called peer support groups. Right? Talk a little bit about how you bring people together. We have teams that are helping a person with their goals. But a lot of formalized aspects of what's going on out there. But today, if we're talking about this subject, the subject of how to support Black Alaskans, what are the peer support groups? What are the opportunities for persons to come together? What are some of the ways that people can engage in healthy interactions that aren't, "I'm worried about what somebody said on that little box," that now is an influencer that's supposed to be so important that most of us here didn't grow up with, right? And so our ability to be self-actualized didn't include that, right? We did the hard dial. The kids don't even know what that is anymore, right? But they're so worried about what that is. How do we interface in that to help them understand what a real healthy relationship is? It's going to take looking at people and not doing it through Zoom all the time, or FaceTime, or what have you. And so systemically, we have a lot of things to work on in that. For us as an older generation, to pass it down to others, right, and make that happen. But you got to bring people together. They have to have a united front and be working on that to be healthy. We were talking earlier. I know a lot of women, they don't want to call on their sons abusing them because they know what the police might do. Right? And so what's the greater, it's an ethical decision. What's the greater good of do no harm? You don't want to be the cause of your own child potentially being harmed, so you accept them harming you. So it becomes a whole nother. My daughter was rough on all of her men because I was the standard. And my wife would tell me I had to back all the way out of that because they weren't going to meet that standard. But she wanted what she saw that I had with my wife. And we're good. She's still here. She's around. 31 years later. But she's finally settled, and it's after I told her, you got to stop calling me in the middle of your arguments. Because that man is never going to have any respect from you, right? And raise your man up. Something wrong's going on. I'm here. But that was the opposite end of it. Does that make sense? So I was like, whoa, didn't see that coming. And trying to help in that regard. But as an entity today, right? There's 10 of us, 9 of us, we making a 10th or 11th as a group. That going out towards our community is important, and we need to carry that message on further, right?
Yes, I want to say this relative to suicide, and as it relates specifically, we're talking about black men, but young black women have that issue too. And at the base of suicide is hopelessness. You know, when people get to a point where they lose all hope of an expectation of a greater day or a greater future or anything beyond the moment, they become utterly hopeless, and the enemy takes that to the nth degree as it relates to, well, I'll just make an exit because of the hopelessness. And we need to learn ways to instill hope in our young people for their present day and for their future. I'll say this, for boys, start early, you know, girls as well. We live in a day and time when parents are not, I'm not going to say all parents, but a lot of parents are not attentive enough to their kids, their children. And I was raised during a time when we didn't have all of the issues that young kids are having now at an early age. We didn't have all of the outside stuff to combat either, as they do today. But always be open and attentive and listening to your children. Don't blow them off. Don't push them off. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, get over that. It's going to be all right. And they have a deep-seated issue to them. You know, I tell my grandkids that if you're trying to get a point over to your parents and they're not trying to hear that, you can always talk to Papa. You can always call me, and they do. You can always call me. I'm going to hear you, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to give you my best. But don't feel like that you don't have anybody that you can open up to. Be attentive to your kids.
Thank you all so much. We're gonna I want to ask a couple more questions, so we're at the 5-minute line. So I need these answers as succinct and quick as possible, if that's possible for some of us. All right, here we go. We spoke about our seniors and advocacy. What are some really important ways that we can support the well-being of our seniors?
I'll speak to that quickly, just with my experience recently with my parents and my wife and I being caregivers. But their medical needs have become so great, we got to find a higher level of support. But don't assume that everybody knows what to expect as they're going through those changes. So even going to the doctor, being there to be, that has to be a partnership. Them going alone might not be the best option. Somebody there listening and saying, is that, did you hear? Somebody being there as a support, because they might not even know what to expect as an outcome out of that appointment.
Thank you so much for that. I want to say the name of the Airman Roger Fortson, who was unfortunately unalived in his home by police. Now, this is a highly charged emotional conversation, and highly triggering and highly traumatizing. But I would love a comment, at least one, just one comment on this topic about tools that we can have to support ourselves, our well-being, and that of our young men.
We have to realize there is prejudice and there is preconceived notions.
I don't think your mic is on.
Just, we have to realize there's prejudice and preconceived notions in the world. And there are police officers and other leaders in the community who have a preconceived notion about black men. And the bigger you get, the scarier you get. And when someone is afraid and have a preconceived notion, their action is going to be different than someone who's approaching the thing. I'm not here to discuss whether it was good or bad, but as a retired state trooper who supervised troopers, who saw troopers who were confident in themselves, less problem. troopers who was afraid of the dark and troopers who was afraid of a certain race or a certain size of a man was more problems. And so we have to realize that, and now you know that exists, we need to teach our kids that information. And know that when you go out there and you get stopped or you get contacted, a significant majority of those police officers have some preconceived notions. You have to be thinking ahead of the game now and be careful what you do. Not blaming the young man who got killed, but sometimes we assume everybody's thinking the way we think and gonna act the way we think people should act, and that's not true. And remember, they're human beings also. And so a human being who's afraid, don't know what's around the corner, sometimes make rash, quick decisions, and those decisions can cost someone's life. So just be aware that that exists. Teach your kids that it's better to come home alive and we'll go down tomorrow and get an attorney and file a complaint than to try to solve the problem tonight. And I would, as a trooper, I would tell people, tonight I'm in charge. What I say goes. It's not a time for discussion. It's not a time for us to work this out. Tomorrow, go down, go to the police station, go to the attorney, do whatever you do to get it resolved. This is a thing that goes on around the nation, happening in Alaska, happening all over the states and stuff. And so we need to teach our young black men to be aware that everybody who's carrying a badge is not out there for their safety.
Thank you so much. Would you all please give a hand to these panelists? We had a few discussions prior to, and we knew that there's no way we were going to adequately be able to address every single one of these issues. We could have spent an hour on 2 questions, quite frankly, to really advocate for ourselves and speak to these issues. But thank you all so much for your contribution, your investment, and your commitment to the wellness of this community, and for your presence, because you sitting here in this space is a demonstration to my children back there of what they can be, of what is possible for them. And if you made it, we can make it. So thank you all so much. Thank you all for being here. I will turn it over. And thank you all so much for this opportunity.
All right, so I'm not going to keep you long, but let's give a round of applause to our I also want to thank the individuals that put this together, beginning with Teresa, Lyons, back here, the team, our board, leaders here as well, Brenda. But 2 words I kept hearing, kept saying, and that was show up. Show up. It's so important that we show up. The Alaska Black Caucus, we can secure the funding. We can secure the grants. We bring these programs to our community. All we ask you to do is show up, to give the information, to bring back to your families, to bring back to your community. That's all we ask. So thank you again. Thank you to our panelists. We'll see you next time. We'll be at the Wendy Williamson Auditorium for the Cancer Telethon, Kareem Davis Graham Cancer Telethon. More than talk about cancer, it's more talk about our health and our wellness. And if we don't do something for ourselves, nobody else will do it for us. So thank you again, everybody. Good night.